My husband suddenly announced, "From now on, we're splitting everything 50-50. I'm only responsible for myself." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at him calmly and said, "Okay. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. The evening had started with a predictable, almost sterile, lack of ceremony. Walter, my husband, wasn't one for grand romantic gestures. His love language was efficiency. So, for our third anniversary, there was no reservation at the little Italian place I adored, no weekend getaway planned. There was takeout from a Thai restaurant with a 4.6-star rating on a food delivery app. We ate directly from the white cardboard cartons, sitting at our polished mahogany dining table that felt far too large for just the two of us. The conversation was stilted. I asked about his day, he gave me a summary of his meetings. He asked if I'd remembered to call the plumber about the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. I confirmed I had. It was the conversation of two business partners managing a household, not two people who had promised to spend their lives together. The silence between our obligatory exchanges was vast and empty. I found myself staring at the single candle I'd insisted on lighting, its small flame dancing bravely in the still air, a tiny beacon of warmth in a room that had grown so cold. After we finished, as I began gathering the cartons to throw away, Walter said, "Wait. Don't clear the table yet. There's something we need to discuss." My heart gave a little flutter of hope. Was this it? A surprise? A gift? Maybe he'd finally remembered the silver locket I'd pointed out months ago. He reached for his briefcase, and my hope died as quickly as it had sparked. He pulled out his sleek, silver laptop. He opened it, turned it to face me, and the candlelight from our sad little anniversary dinner cast a glacial glow on the screen. He had meticulously crafted an Excel spreadsheet. The title, in a cold, 14-point Calibri font, read, "Proposal for the Optimization of Marital Finances." Optimization. The word was an ice pick to the heart. What an insult. It hung in the air between us, colder than the ice melting in our water glasses, more final than the end of our meal. Judith, his voice was devoid of warmth, as if he were leading a trivial weekly meeting with his department, not speaking to the woman who shared his bed. He tapped a manicured finger on the trackpad, highlighting a row of figures. "I've run the numbers. As you can see, our current financial model is unbalanced." He gestured at the screen, at the charts and graphs he'd prepared. "With my salary," he continued, "the pride in his 7-figure income barely concealed, and your status as a non-income earning spouse, a full-time homemaker, our cash flow is dangerously one-sided. This is unhealthy for the long-term stability of our home." My blood ran cold. He made homemaker sound like a disease, a liability on a balance sheet. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He spoke of our life together as if it were a business on the brink of failure, a poorly managed project he, the brilliant director, was now stepping in to fix. He never once mentioned our 7 years together, the 3 years we'd been married. He didn't mention the countless nights I'd stayed up, a comforting presence, when he was stressed about a promotion. He didn't mention the dinner parties I'd hosted for his clients, the thank you notes I'd written, the life I'd managed so seamlessly that it allowed him to dedicate every waking hour to his career. And he certainly didn't mention that I had walked away from a senior track position at a top accounting firm, a career as a CPA that I had built with my own mind and my own grit, to become this unhealthy, non-income earning wife he now looked down upon. No, the entire conversation was about money. Efficiency. Return on investment. And beneath it all, a thick, undeniable layer of disdain. His words pricked my skin like 1,000 invisible needles. I looked at him, the man I had loved for 7 years, the man whose shirts I still ironed, and I saw a complete and utter stranger. His face, once so familiar and dear, was now just a collection of features, a sharp jawline, eyes that held no light, a mouth forming words that were methodically, precisely, cutting me to the bone. A fist clenched around my heart so tightly I could barely breathe. I felt the burn of tears behind my eyes, the familiar sting of betrayal and humiliation. But I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't scream. I would not perform the role of the hysterical wife he was so clearly expecting. I just gave a slight nod, my eyes locked on his, my expression as blank as the wall behind him. Okay. The word was quiet, a whisper in the silent room, but it landed with the force of a gavel. Just like that, he had quantified our marriage into a cold, sterile financial report. Fine. He shouldn't be surprised when I decided to settle the accounts using the very methods he so admired. He seemed taken aback by my calm acceptance. I could see a flicker of confusion in his eyes before it was quickly replaced by relief. He'd expected a fight, tears, a long, emotional scene. My quiet compliance made things easier for him, a problem neatly solved. He closed the laptop with a decisive snap. The sound echoed the closing of a door on our life together. Get some rest, he said, the words as robotic as a pre-programmed response. That night, we lay in bed, the space between us a frozen tundra. His back was to me, his breathing even and deep. He was already asleep, his conscience clear. I stared into the darkness, the spreadsheet glowing in my mind's eye, its neat columns and cold numbers burning into my memory. And in that darkness, a cold resolve settled in my bones. The game had changed. He had set the rules. And I was going to play to win. I didn't sleep. How could I? I lay there for hours, listening to the rhythmic sound of Walter's breathing, a sound that had once brought me comfort but now felt alien and mocking. Each inhale and exhale was a reminder of the stranger lying next to me. I thought about the life I'd given up, the woman I used to be. The Judith who could command a boardroom, who found a thrilling beauty in balancing a complex ledger, who had a future that was hers and hers alone. Where had she gone? She hadn't disappeared. She had just been dormant. Waiting. When my alarm chimed at 6:15 a.m., the sound was jarring. It was the signal that had started my day, his day, for years. I turned it off and lay still for a moment, then swung my legs out of bed. There was no hesitation. The grief of the night had cooled into something hard and clear, purpose. Instead of padding to the kitchen in my robe and slippers, I walked to my vanity. I flicked on the soft lights that surrounded the mirror and looked at myself. Really looked. There were fine lines around my eyes that hadn't been there when I'd quit my job. There was a tiredness in my gaze that spoke of years of putting someone else's needs first. Today, that ended. I began my skincare routine, but it wasn't a routine anymore. It was a ritual. I took my time, methodically applying each serum and cream. The cool touch of the jade roller on my skin felt like a promise. Each step was a small, deliberate act of reclaiming myself, of tending to the woman who had been neglected for too long. Then came the makeup. I evened my skin tone with foundation, added a touch of blush to my cheeks, and carefully applied mascara. I wasn't preparing for a battle. I was simply preparing for my day. A day that now belonged entirely to me. Walter emerged from the walk-in closet, already dressed in his tailored suit pants and an unironed shirt. He was wrestling with his tie, his brow furrowed in the particular kind of annoyance a man feels when his perfectly ordered world has a wrinkle in it. He stopped in the doorway, a knot of irritation tightening on his face. "Where's my blue striped shirt?" "The one for the board meeting." "Why wasn't it ironed?" The question wasn't accusatory, it was genuinely baffled, as if he'd asked why the sun hadn't risen. I met his gaze in the mirror, my expression placid, almost serene. "It's in the closet, Walter. Right where it always is. You can find it yourself," I said lightly, turning back to my reflection to apply my lipstick with a steady, precise hand. "The iron is in the storage room. You can get that yourself, too." He froze, his hands hovering over his half-tied tie. The air crackled with his confusion. He was processing my words, but they didn't compute. What's that supposed to mean? I swiveled on my stool to face him, a faint, cool smile playing on my lips. The smile didn't reach my eyes. It means exactly what you think it means, Walter. 50-50. Remember? Your proposal. Your rules. He still didn't seem to grasp the full implication. The entitlement was so deeply ingrained in him, it was like his skeleton. He finished his tie with a frustrated yank and strode into the dining room, clearly expecting his world to snap back into its proper alignment. His irritation finally boiled over when he saw it, the empty, polished table. No plate of eggs, no steaming cup of coffee, no neatly folded newspaper. Nothing. Breakfast, Judith, he called out, his voice sharp with impatience. I have that big meeting with the board today. You know I can't function without a decent breakfast. I stood up, my own preparations complete, and walked toward him. My heels clicked decisively against the hardwood floor, a sound that seemed to mark a new rhythm in our home. I stopped a few feet away from him, my posture straight, my gaze unwavering. I enunciated each word with a chilling, deliberate clarity. From the moment you made your little announcement last night, I began, my voice calm and even, I became responsible for my own breakfast. As for yours, you're on your own. He stood rigid, his face a mask of disbelief. The powerful director, the man who managed a department of 50 people and commanded six-figure deals, looked utterly lost in his own home. Judith, are you serious? You're going to act like this over a little thing? This isn't a little thing, Walter. My voice remained steady, a perfect counterpoint to his rising anger. These are the new rules of our marriage. You made them. I'm simply adhering to the contract. I grabbed my purse from the entryway table. He watched me, speechless, as I walked past him toward the door. I could feel his wounded pride radiating off him like heat. I didn't look back. The front door clicked shut behind me, the sound echoing in the cavernous, silent living room. I didn't slam it. I didn't need to. The quiet finality was much more effective. Standing alone in the silent house, listening to that echo, the smile on my face grew colder. This was just the beginning. I didn't drive to the grocery store or the dry cleaners or any of the other places that made up the map of my life as Mrs. Walter Sterling. Instead, I drove to a small cafe a few towns over, a place with good coffee and free Wi-Fi where no one knew me. I ordered a latte and a croissant, sat at a small table in the corner, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something that resembled freedom. After I finished, I didn't go home. I went to the study. Our study. The room was Walter's domain, really, filled with his business books and awards. My own desk was in the corner, a dusty, forgotten piece of furniture. On it sat the laptop I hadn't touched in years. It had been my lifeline in my old career, a tool of precision and logic. Now, it would be my weapon. I ran my hand over the cool metal casing. A fine layer of dust came away on my fingertips. It felt symbolic. I opened it, and after a moment of protest, the familiar operating system flickered to life, a ghost from my past. My fingers, a bit stiff at first on the keyboard, soon found their old rhythm. The muscle memory was still there, buried but not gone. I opened a new Excel spreadsheet. The blank grid of cells looked like a field of fresh snow, a place for a new beginning. In the top cell, I typed the title, Marriage Liquidation. A cold, clean satisfaction settled over me. He wanted to play with numbers? I would give him numbers. I started with the big things. I listed our condo, purchased after we were married, and in a separate browser tab, I did some research. I found 3 comparable units in our building that were currently for rent. I took the average, a neat $6,000 a month. In the adjacent cell, under the column Judith's share, I typed $3,000. Then came the utilities. Gas, electric, internet, water, HOA fees. I pulled up our old bank statements and calculated the average monthly cost for each, splitting them down the middle to the exact cent. I created columns for everything, every shared expense, every asset. My mind, which had felt foggy and dulled by years of domestic routine, felt sharp again, alive with purpose. It was exhilarating. That evening, Walter came home reeking of whiskey. It was becoming a pattern. He'd clearly had a few drinks after work, probably complaining to his colleagues about his suddenly difficult, uncooperative wife. He flicked the study light switch several times, a frustrated, repetitive click-click-click in the quiet house. The room remained dark. "What the hell is wrong with the study light?" he grumbled, stumbling out of the darkness and into the living room. I was sitting on the sofa, bathed in the glow of a single-floor lamp, reading a book on contract law I had picked up from the library that afternoon. The light and shadow drew a stark line between us, bisecting the room more effectively than any line of tape ever could. "Nothing's wrong with it," I said, not looking up. "I just unscrewed the bulb." He stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. "Are you insane, Judith? Have you completely lost your mind?" "Not at all," I replied calmly, finally closing my book and giving him my full attention. "According to our phone records, you contacted me twice today, for a total of 1 minute and 30 seconds. You asked if I had picked up your dry cleaning, and I informed you that under our new 50-50 agreement, that was your responsibility. You never expressed a shared need for the study's electrical circuit. Therefore, I assumed you had relinquished your right to use it." He stormed across the room, his face flushed with a mixture of alcohol and anger, and tried the switch for the main chandelier. Nothing. The room remained shrouded in shadow, except for my little island of light. "What the hell are you trying to do?" he roared, pointing an accusatory finger at me. I calmly picked up a freshly printed A4 sheet from the coffee table. It was warm from the printer, the ink still smelling faintly of chemicals. I slapped it down in front of him. Bold black letters spelled out the title, Household Resource Usage Agreement. "This," I said, my voice as level as a balance sheet, "is an execution framework based on the 50-50 principle you proposed. It clearly delineates the shared and private zones of our home. The sofa is half yours, half mine. However, the electricity account for the main lights is under my name. So is the internet. If you require electricity or internet for the study and your designated areas, you are free to contact the utility companies and open your own accounts. I've included their contact information on page 3. His hands trembled with rage as he snatched the paper. For the first time, he saw the unfamiliar coldness, the sharp edge of steel in his once docile wife's eyes. Just as he was about to rip the paper to shreds, his phone buzzed, a cheerful, electronic sound that was jarringly out of place. He glanced at the caller ID, and the fury on his face instantly melted into a tenderness I hadn't seen in years. A tenderness he had never shown me. He stepped onto the balcony, closing the glass door behind him, but not before I heard his voice, lowered to a murmur. "Lorraine, don't cry. Of course, I believe you. It's my fault, Lorraine. No, she's just being difficult. Lorraine. His college sweetheart. The one that got away, or so the story went. So, this whole financial optimization, this grand, insulting proposal, it was just a smokescreen. A prelude to clearing the stage for another woman. He wasn't trying to fix our marriage, he was trying to liquidate it as cheaply as possible to minimize the financial impact on his next venture. A potential divorce settlement was clearly on his mind. I watched his silhouette through the glass, his shoulders slumped in a performance of sympathy, his voice soft as he soothed her. Then, I looked back at the agreement he'd tossed on the sofa. I left it there. Excellent, Walter. The liquidation has officially begun. Saturday announced itself with the howl of a jet engine. I shot upright in bed, my heart pounding, to find the source of the noise. It was Walter, in the living room, wielding the vacuum cleaner like a weapon of war. His jaw was clenched, his movements sharp and angry. He was vacuuming a perfectly straight line down the middle of the living room carpet, from the fireplace to the bay window. He moved with a grim, militaristic precision, like a general drawing a border on a map. He went over his side, exactly his side, 4 times, the roar of the machine a testament to his fury. The carpet on his half of the room looked pristine, hotel perfect. Then, he lifted the vacuum head, careful not to let it touch a single fiber of my side, and marched it back to the closet. Our 1,500 square foot condo now contained a demilitarized zone. His half was aggressively tidy and smelled of the artificial citrus scent from the carpet freshener he'd sprinkled liberally. My half was serene and actually clean, maintained through quiet, daily care, not performative rage. When he finished, he stood in the doorway with his arms folded, surveying the bizarre half-clean/half-not spectacle. A vein in his temple was ticking like a metronome. Household sanitation, I reminded him from the kitchen, where I was enjoying a cup of coffee and reading the news on my tablet, is the responsibility of the individual, per our verbal agreement. He didn't answer. The closet door thudded shut like a gavel. By noon, the first casualty of our Cold War arrived. He had thrown his overflowing hamper, a week's worth of gym clothes and work shirts, into the washing machine without checking. He never checked. He just assumed I would have already taken care of my own things. 30 minutes later, a bellowed Judith echoed through the condo as if the ceiling were collapsing. I calmly set down my tablet and walked to the laundry room. He was standing there, dripping wet from having plunged his hands into the machine, holding up my favorite silk blouse. The delicate cream fabric, a gift to myself after my last promotion years ago, was now streaked with a grieving, inky blue from his new jeans. The bias cut was warped into a wrinkled, shrunken fist. It was ruined. "Judith, why didn't you take your clothes out?" he snapped, his tone that of a manager addressing a clumsy intern who had just cost the company a major account. I didn't look at the blouse. I didn't allow myself to feel the pang of loss for a small, beautiful thing. Instead, I tapped the laminated page I had posted on the cupboard door that morning. Household Resource Usage Agreement. Section 4, Shared Devices. "The washing machine is a shared appliance," I read aloud in a calm, clear voice, as if reading minutes from a meeting. "The user must ensure it's empty before operation. You failed to exercise due diligence." He sputtered, for a moment speechless. I'll pay for the stupid shirt," he said through clenched teeth, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Wonderful. I was prepared. I had anticipated this sort of carelessness. I pulled a folded piece of paper from the pocket of my cardigan and handed it to him. It was a printed copy of the digital receipt from when I'd purchased the blouse online. $350 per Article 3 of our agreement, property damage compensation. Please transfer the funds within 24 hours to avoid a late fee of 5%, compounded daily. He glared at me, the ruined blouse twisted in his fist like an accusation. "You're a schemer. You planned this." "Accurate," I said pleasantly, a cool little smile on my lips. "I planned for your carelessness." The 50-50 rule taught me that keeping a clear ledger prevents anyone from taking advantage of you. He looked at me then, truly looked at me, and I think he finally understood that the woman he married, the woman who would have sighed and tried to fix the blouse, was gone. In her place was someone who understood contracts, liabilities, and, most importantly, the bottom line. That evening, he had an industry gala. It was one of those red carpet for funds events, a necessary evil of his corporate world. In the past, I would have spent the entire day helping him prepare. I would have picked up his suit from the dry cleaner, laid out his cufflinks, and helped him choose the perfect tie. I would have stood by his side all night, smiling graciously, a silent asset to his career. Tonight, I was reading a novel on my side of the sofa. He tore through the closet, the sound of hangers being scraped aggressively across the metal rod punctuating the silence. After a few minutes of frustrated muttering, he stalked out into the living room, his face a thundercloud. "Where's my Hermes tie?" "The midnight blue one with the star pattern." "I put it away," I said, not looking up from my book. It was in my closet, safely tucked away in a tie box. I had bought it for him for his birthday 2 years ago. Get it? It was a command, not a request. The tone he used with his subordinates. I slowly, deliberately, folded the corner of my page to mark my spot and closed the book. I placed it on the end table and finally looked at him. Walter, our prenup, which you insisted upon, is very clear. Section 2, subsection C, all jewelry, clothing, and accessories purchased by one party as a gift to the other remain the personal property of the purchaser. I bought that tie. It's my property. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape, as if I were speaking a foreign language. You're saying you won't let me wear my own tie? I'm saying it's not your tie, I corrected gently. However, since I'm not an unreasonable person, if you'd like to use it, you may rent it. Rent it? He sputtered, his voice rising in disbelief. $30 for the evening, I said, my voice as calm as if I were discussing the weather. And a $500 deposit, of course. Refundable upon the tie's safe and timely return, free of any stains or damage. Are you out of your mind? He roared. You created an itemized bill for the toast you ate from a loaf of bread I purchased, I said mildly, my gaze unwavering. You made the rules, Walter. I'm merely enforcing them with the same meticulous attention to detail you so admire. He stormed out, slamming the front door so hard a picture frame on the wall rattled. He returned hours later, well after midnight. He was wearing his sharp suit, but it was topped by the loudest, most garish tie the mall could sell to a panicking man at 8 p.m. on a Saturday. It was a swirling monstrosity of purple and gold. I didn't say a word about how it clashed horribly with his skin tone or how the pattern screamed midlife crisis. The universe took care of that for me. His phone, which he'd left on the coffee table, lit up with a message that floated across the lock screen before he could snatch it away. Walter, don't be mad. Judith probably just doesn't get these things. She's been at home so long. In my eyes, you'll always be the most stylish man in the room. Lorraine. At 11 p.m. the next night, while his mood glowed smug and vindicated from her sycophantic message, I drafted an email. The subject line was Weekly Services Invoice and Reimbursement Request. I sent it to his work address and CC'd his personal phone for good measure. Culinary services, $75. Common area janitorial services, $80. Silk garment restoration service, $50. Luxury goods advisory, $80. Household financial modeling, $120. Subtotal, $405. Attached reimbursement request, $350. Total due, $755. 1 minute later, my phone pinged. A transfer notification from my banking app. Amount received, $800. The note attached was just 4 words, "You make me sick." I stared at the words on my screen and felt nothing. The part of me that he could hurt had gone numb, replaced by a cold, calculating machine. I accepted the transfer. I sent a reply, "Thank you for your business. Overpayment of $45 will be credited to your account for next week's invoice." Then I opened a new tab on my laptop. I went to the official CPA review course website, a site I hadn't visited in years. Using exactly $800 of his money, I renewed my access to all the study materials and ordered a fresh set of exam prep books. Payment successful glowed on the screen. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt that clean, righteous hunger that numbers and logic used to give me. What he intended as a final, humiliating insult had just funded the first brick in the wall of my new life. On Tuesday, the doorbell rang. It wasn't the quick, friendly ring of a delivery person. It was a staccato burst of 3 short, imperious rings. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. I set my coffee down, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Walter's mother, Marlene, stood on our doorstep, poised like an actress about to make her grand entrance. She was dressed in a tweed suit that probably cost more than my first car, a string of pearls tied around her throat, and she was clutching a handbag that could likely smother a small animal. She swept in without waiting for an invitation, her expensive perfume arriving a second before she did. Her eyes, as sharp and unforgiving as a hawk's, did a full scan of the living room. They landed on the invisible equator running through the space, noting the pristine state of my side versus the faint layer of dust and a stray newspaper on Walter's. Then, her gaze snapped to me, her eyes narrowed in disapproval. "Judith, what on earth is going on here?" "My son called me. He works himself to the bone to provide this beautiful home for you, and he comes home to this." She pointed a manicured, gloved finger at a faint smudge on the coffee table on Walter's side, a smudge that existed only in her hypercritical imagination. "I didn't raise him to live in a pigsty." Walter trailed in behind her, the picture of put-upon innocence. He had his hands shoved in his pockets and a mournful look on his face. It was a classic move, one he'd perfected since childhood, I was sure. Let the woman with the pearls do the stabbing. In the past, I would have been flustered. I would have apologized, rushed to make coffee, tried to smooth things over. Not anymore. Instead of offering excuses, I walked to the media console and slid a folder out from underneath it. "Marlene, before we continue this conversation, I think it would be beneficial for you to review this." I placed the folder into her gloved hands. "What is this nonsense?" she muttered, her perfectly lipstick mouth forming a frown. She flipped through the pages with a dismissive air, the bullet points, the diagrams, the sanction boxes. It was a fresh, glossy copy of the Household Resource Usage Agreement, complete with subheaders like implementation protocols and dispute resolution mechanisms. "It's an execution framework based on the 50-50 principle that Walter proposed," I said, my voice pleasant and informative, as if I were explaining a financial report to a new client. "As you can see, it delineates shared zones and private zones. Since the shared utility accounts are currently under my name, they are therefore under my control. Now, if you'd like some coffee, I would be delighted to serve you on my side of the room. The guest rate is $5 per cup. I accept cash or digital transfer." Walter's mouth twitched, a desperate attempt to suppress a reaction. Marlene made a small, strangled sound, like a tea kettle dying. She looked from the document to my face, her eyes wide with disbelief. "How dare you monetize hospitality?" she hissed, her voice a low, furious whisper. "How dare your son monetize a marriage?" I replied, my smile unwavering. "Would you like cream with that? It's an extra 50 cents. She didn't. As it turned out, she wanted a scene. She launched into a tirade about the sanctity of marriage, a wife's duties, and my shocking lack of gratitude. She wanted tradition and guilt and shame to crack me back into my old, convenient shape. But I had numbers now, and numbers are the opposite of hysteria. They are calm, logical, and irrefutable. They keep you on the road while everyone else is spinning out of control. When they finally left, after she had called me ungrateful, cold, and a disgrace, and after Walter had added the quieter, deeper insult of standing by and saying nothing in my defense, I went to my desk. I opened a fresh notebook, a beautiful one with a linen cover that I had bought for myself that morning. I wrote a title across the first page in neat, block letters, Incident Log. IL1, Laundry Cross-Contamination. Walter at fault. Compensation received in full. IL2, Verbal harassment via text. Documented and archived. IL3, Interference in household governance. Attempted emotional manipulation. Resolved with policy presentation and fee-for-service offer. I took a photo of the pages with my phone and uploaded them to a secure cloud folder labeled Marital Audit. I created subfolders for dates, times, and supporting media. There was no rage in my actions, no exclamation points in my notes. Just entries. Just data. I learned a long time ago, in a life I was now reclaiming, that the truth sits very still while you take its photograph. The days that followed fell into a new, disciplined rhythm. The house was quiet, a space of two separate, silent entities. I would wake up, make my own coffee, and sit at my desk in the study, my side of the study, by 7 a.m. By Friday, I was back in my old uniform. Not heels and a suit, but deep, unwavering concentration and a stack of accounting problem sets. I cleared a section of my desk, set a lamp to cast a circle of warm focus, and took the first full practice exam for financial accounting and reporting. My hands remembered the shape of the work. The satisfying click of the calculator keys, the smooth glide of a pen across paper. Debits and credits felt like lungs filling and emptying, a natural, logical order in a world that had become chaotic. Time passed without my noticing, marked only by the need to get up and stretch or refill my water glass. Midweek, I forced myself to leave the condo. The silence was becoming oppressive, and I knew I needed to reconnect with the outside world, with the woman I used to be. I called an old colleague, Brenda. She used to sit 3 cubes down at the CPA firm, the one that had been grooming me for a senior position before I walked away to become Mrs. Walter Sterling. We met at a small, bustling coffee shop downtown. The air was thick with the smell of roasted beans and the low hum of dozens of conversations. It felt like a different universe from the silent, divided home I'd left. Brenda arrived, looking exactly the same, just with a few more laugh lines around her eyes. She gave me a long, warm hug. "Judith," she said, pulling back to look at me. "It's been too long. How are you?" "Really?" We sat and talked for over an hour. I didn't tell her everything, not the ugly details, but I told her enough. I told her about Walter's proposal, about my decision to go back and get my CPA license reinstated. I expected pity, or maybe even an "I told you so." Instead, she just listened, her expression thoughtful. She took in the new, steely resolve in my eyes, the quiet armor I'd sewn out of spreadsheets and self-respect. She exhaled slowly. "Good for you," she said finally. "And listen, if you need to get your sea legs back, come pick up some forensic bookkeeping overflow from us." She leaned forward, her voice earnest. "Small clients, messy books that need cleaning up. It's not glamorous, but it pays decently." "Oh, Brenda, I don't know," I admitted, a pang of my old insecurity surfacing. "I'm so rusty. It's been years." "You're furious," she corrected gently, her eyes kind but perceptive. "It reads like confidence from the outside." "You'll be fine." She was right. I was furious. But that fury was a fire, and for the first time in a long time, it was fueling me instead of burning me up. The first file she sent over that afternoon was a disaster. A small, family-owned bakery was on the verge of bankruptcy, and their books were a tangled web of misplaced invoices, personal expenses mixed with business costs, and years of questionable accounting. It was a puzzle. A messy, complicated puzzle. And I loved it. It took me 3 solid hours of focused work, cross-referencing bank statements and receipts, creating new ledgers, untangling the chaos. When I was done, I had not only balanced their books, I had created a simple, clear financial statement and a 1-page summary in plain English that the owners could actually understand. I sent it all back to Brenda. Minutes later, she replied with a gif of a firework exploding. The text below it read, "They love you. Keep them coming. Also, you always had a knack for finding patterns where no one else could. You ever think about forensics full-time, not just bookkeeping? The really messy stuff, like tracking hidden assets in a contentious divorce?" I had, once. Before I learned that love can misfile an entire life under the category of hobbies. "Yes," I typed back, a slow smile spreading across my face. "I think I just did." The work gave me a focus outside the 4 walls of my Cold War condo. But inside, the battle continued. I started noticing a pattern in Walter's finances. Every few days, a cash withdrawal from our joint account. Always an even number, $200, $400, $600. Always from an ATM across town, in a suburb we never frequented. Always late at night. I created a new tab in my marriage liquidation spreadsheet, Dissipation Indicators. I logged every single withdrawal, with the date, time, and ATM location. He was building a stash. Funding his new life with our money. The evidence was piling up, one neat entry at a time. The following Sunday, Marlene staged another ambush, this time disguised as a family dinner. "It's time to put all this nonsense behind us," she'd trilled on the phone, a command veiled as an olive branch. "It's important to keep up appearances, for Walter's sake." The dinner was held at her house, a place filled with polished silver and portraits of sterling ancestors, as if the geography itself could argue me into submission. I chose my armor carefully, a simple, severe black dress that didn't apologize for itself. And instead of a purse, I carried my marital audit binder like a clutch. The weight of it in my hands was reassuring, a tangible record of my sanity. The air in her house was thick with the smell of roast beef and unspoken accusations. The conversation during dinner was a masterclass in passive aggression. Marlene would ask me a pointed question about how I was keeping busy these days, and before I could answer, she would launch into a lengthy monologue about how vital a supportive wife was to a man with a high-stress career like Walter's. Walter, for his part, stared at his plate, diligently cutting his roast beef into perfectly uniform pieces, the picture of a man suffering in noble silence. Finally, as dessert was being served, a heavy, dense chocolate cake, Marlene made her move. She set down her fork, placed a hand on my arm in a gesture of feigned intimacy, and smiled the way a cat smiles at a cornered, wounded bird. "Judith, dear," she began, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. "Have you considered that your career curiosities might be distracting you from your primary duties?" "Which duties would those be, Marlene?" I asked, placing my own fork down gently beside my plate. "Supporting my son, of course," she said, as if the answer were the most obvious thing in the world. As if the entire purpose of our household, our marriage, my life, was singular and male. "This ledger, this project you've created. It's humiliating him. It's unseemly. A man needs peace in his home to excel in the world." The table fell silent. This was it. The moment she had been building towards all night. Walter still wouldn't look at me, but I could see the tension in his jaw. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply opened my binder. The neatly organized tabs winked up at me under the light of her crystal chandelier: incident log, guest agreements, reconciliations, exhibits. I slipped a single page free from the exhibits section. It was the log of his late-night cash withdrawals, a neat column of dates, times, and amounts. I laid it on the white tablecloth beside her dessert plate. "This ledger, Marlene, is the only reason I'm still sitting in this house," I said calmly, my voice cutting through the heavy, suffocating silence. "It's the proof that I'm not hysterical, that I'm not imagining things. It is the official record of a business agreement that your son proposed, and that I accepted." I shifted my gaze from her shocked face to meet Walter's. His eyes were wide with panic. He knew what was on that paper. "And if I told you," I added, my voice dropping slightly, speaking to him more than to her, "that he was seeing someone? If I told you he moved cash from our joint account, our shared marital assets, to fund that relationship? Would that make the ledger feel more or less humiliating to you?" "Don't you dare," he said under his breath, a venomous, desperate hiss. I looked him straight in the eye. "I won't hurt you, Walter," I said quietly, a promise that was also a clear and undeniable threat. "I will simply balance the books." I stood up, leaving my cake untouched. I picked up my binder, gave Marlene a small, polite nod, and walked out of her house. The cold night air felt clean and sharp against my face, a welcome antidote to the stifling atmosphere I'd left behind. On the walk home, I stopped at a late-night bakery and bought myself a perfect, flaky croissant. I ate it on a park bench under a street lamp, the city humming around me. I took out a pen and made a new entry in my log, a 10, family dinner. Attempted emotional reframing of marital duties, ledger deployed as counter-narrative. Hostile party neutralized. Then I turned to a fresh page and wrote a new title, Exit Options and Strategy. 1. Trial separation with defined financial protocols and non-negotiable move-out timeline. 2. Divorce filing with documented evidence of dissipation of marital assets to be submitted for settlement leverage. 3. Negotiated settlement with concession on condo equity in exchange for a strict, legally binding confidentiality clause. I fell asleep early for once, the binder on the nightstand next to me. It was the kind of deep, dreamless sleep that feels like confidence. The days after that disastrous dinner were filled with a strange, productive calm. The condo had become a checklist, a project to be managed. I set up my own internet service, a new account under my name. I called the electric company and had them create a duplicate account for his circuits. I went through all our shared streaming platforms and methodically canceled the ones I was subsidizing. Each small act felt like taking back a piece of my own life. I began packing. I bought sturdy cardboard boxes and a thick black marker. I started in the guest room closet, packing away things that were mine alone, things from my life before Walter. I labeled each box with precise, neat handwriting, CPA textbooks, audit client files from old firm, college mementos, memories I actually want to keep. On Thursday evening, Brenda called, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I passed your name to someone, Judith, she said, the excitement bubbling in her words. A senior partner at Kestrel and Bloom. Their forensic accounting unit. He was complaining about being swamped with messy small business bankruptcies and a couple of high-net-worth divorce cases. I told him I knew someone who could sit very still with chaos and make it show its math. A warmth spread through my chest, a feeling I hadn't realized I'd missed so much. Thank you, Brenda. I can do that, I said, feeling something deep and steady, a foundation I thought I had lost, unfurl inside me. The interview was set for Monday morning. When I hung up the phone, I walked over to my exit options plan and underlined a phrase I had written, negotiate from a position of strength. Then I drafted a new document. The tone wasn't angry or emotional. It was formal, professional, almost kind. The title was, Notice of Reconciliation Meeting and Forward Plan. I scheduled it for Sunday at 5 p.m. at our dining table. I printed 2 copies, placed his in a crisp manila envelope, and left it on the exact center of the table, bisecting the imaginary border like a bridge. I also sent a copy to his work email, with the subject line Urgent, Marital Financial Reconciliation, and marked it with a read receipt request. He read the email at 9:14 a.m. on Friday. He didn't respond. At 4:56 p.m. on Sunday, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Walter. Something came up. Running late. Start without me. So, I did. At 5 p.m. sharp, I sat at the dining table with my binder, a legal pad, and 3 different colored pens. I started the meeting. I read my prepared agenda out loud to the empty chair across from me, because it mattered that the words existed in the air, that the plan was spoken into existence. Item 1, a proposed 90-day trial separation. Item 2, a move-out date for one party. Item 3, a preliminary discussion of asset division per the prenup and principles of equitable distribution. Item 4, a plan for selling or renting the condo. Item 5, a mutual confidentiality clause. At 5:32, the elevator in the hall dinged. I heard footsteps approaching our door, then a pause. It had to be him. Come in, I called, my voice steady, not looking up from my notes. I was expecting the familiar smell of Walter's expensive cologne. The door opened. It wasn't cologne that arrived. It was the clean, damp scent of rain and a fragrance so unadorned it felt like an apology, shampoo, cold air, human skin. A woman stood in the doorway. She was wearing a wrinkled trench coat that looked like it had been slept in, and her eyes, large and brown, looked like they had practiced crying and were tired of it. She had the kind of delicate, fragile pretty that lives in old photographs other people keep. A delicate mouth, dark hair caught back in a simple elastic that had lost most of its snap. She was clutching a large manila envelope as if she were afraid it might change weight or even disappear if she gripped it wrong. Judith, she said, and her voice, soft, hesitant, told me the rest of the story before her words even could. I'm Lorraine. Of course you are, I said. My own voice was a stranger to me, devoid of any emotion. I gestured with my pen to the empty chair opposite mine, the chair I had left open for a negotiation, not a confession. I waited, my hands folded on top of my open binder, my face perfectly, unnervingly still. I need to talk to you, she said in a rush, stepping inside as if propelled by a force she couldn't control. Not to hurt you. I think I need to fix something I helped break. She lifted the envelope a few inches, a silent offering. He told me you were cold, controlling, that you didn't love him anymore, that you were, she swallowed hard, her throat working. It doesn't matter what he told me. The point is, I believed him. I shouldn't have. Her fingers trembled as she set the envelope on the polished surface of the table between us. It whispered against the wood. I'm late, she added, and it took me a second to understand that she didn't mean she was late for our unintentional meeting. She meant something else, something ancient and simple and life-altering. Her free hand moved to rest on her stomach, a gesture as natural as breathing, the way a thought touches a bruise. 6 weeks. The world went very quiet. The rain softened its fists against the windows, turning into a gentle, mournful hiss. Somewhere in the building, a child laughed, a bright, happy sound that traveled through pipes and walls to arrive in our silent, broken room like a message from a country I no longer lived in. The future he had been planning had just walked through my door. If you're still listening, if you've followed my journey to this heartbreaking, impossible moment, please help me out by liking this video and commenting with the number 1 down below. It lets me know that you're here with me, that my story matters. Your support is a huge encouragement for me to keep going. Please, comment with the number 1 and listen to what happened next. For a long, precise moment, I didn't move. I just looked at her, this woman who was the living embodiment of my husband's betrayal, and I felt a profound and surprising stillness. The part of me that should have been screaming or crying was silent. In its place was the cold, clear logic of the accountant. This was a new variable, a significant and unforeseen liability. And it had to be factored into the equation. I slid the manila envelope toward me. I didn't open it. Not yet. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside. It was proof. Documentation. The kind of thing I understood. Sit, I said to Lorraine, and my voice was softer than I expected it to be. Drink some water. I stood, went to the kitchen, and filled 2 glasses from the filter. My movements were steady, unhurried. I placed 1 glass in front of her. Her hands were shaking so much she had to use both of them to lift it to her lips. We're going to do this differently than he did, I said, sitting back down. We're going to do it clean. Just then, the lock clicked. The door swung open. Walter stepped in, shaking rain from his coat, an expression of annoyance already arranged on his face, ready for the confrontation he thought he was walking into. Judith, sorry I'm late, I got held up, this better be. His words died in his throat. His eyes took in the scene. Me, at the head of the table, calm and composed. The manila envelope, a quiet rectangular truth sitting between us. And Lorraine. Lorraine, at my table, in our home, her face pale, her hands wrapped around a glass of water like it was a lifeline. For the first time in a very long time, his expression wasn't anything practiced. It wasn't charm or anger or condescension. It was simply human, and utterly, hopelessly unprepared. Hi, Walter, I said, and the placid calm in my voice seemed to surprise even me. You're just in time. We're reconciling the books. His mouth opened, then closed. The performing muscles in his face, the ones that created the charming smile, the look of sincere contrition, twitched, searched for a script, and found none. Lorraine, he said finally, his voice a soft, pleading whisper. You shouldn't be here. I know, she whispered back, and I could hear years of being reasonable, of being the one who didn't make waves, in that one syllable. But I came anyway. I patted the thick binder beside me. Walter, we can do this now, the three of us, or we can do it with a lawyer for each of us present in a room where the clocks get billed by the minute. Your call. He ignored me, his focus entirely on Lorraine. He took a step toward her. Let's go outside and talk. He tried to gesture for her to follow him into the hall. She didn't move. She just stared down into her water glass. Maybe she had finally practiced not moving. He tried again, his voice strained. This is a private matter. It's between me and my wife. Lorraine's hand, almost unconsciously, drifted back to her stomach. No, Walter, she said, her voice quiet but firm. It's between all of us now. The silence in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. It divided itself into columns: assets, liabilities, truth. I pulled a clean sheet of paper from my stack. Forward plan, option A, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. Negotiated separation. We begin a temporary separation for 90 days, effective immediately. Exclusive use of the condo is assigned to me during that period. A fair market rent credit will be applied to my share if we sell, or to your buyout price if we don't. You will cease all withdrawals from the joint account, except for documented shared expenses, which must be approved by me in writing. You will also provide a full and sworn disclosure of any and all additional financial accounts you've opened in the last 12 months. I tapped the manila envelope. Or attempted to hide. I didn't hide anything, he flinched, the denial automatic but weak. Then the disclosure will be easy, I said smoothly. Option B is divorce. I will have my lawyer file tomorrow morning. The filing will include all exhibits from this binder, and from this envelope, showing a clear pattern of dissipation of marital assets and infidelity. We can, of course, attach a strict confidentiality clause to the final settlement. I'm not interested in celebrity, Walter, only in math. He looked from my face to Lorraine's, a dawning horror in his eyes. He finally understood. He was no longer in control of the narrative. You told her, he said to Lorraine, his voice filled with disbelief and betrayal. She asked, Lorraine replied, her own voice finally steadying, gaining strength. And I brought proof. Because I believed you when you said she was a cold, calculating monster. Her lips tightened. Never mind what I believed. That's on me now. He scrubbed a hand over his face, looking suddenly older, smaller. You don't have to do this, Judith. Actually, we do, I said, my pen clicking shut with a sharp, final sound. Numbers don't dissolve simply because you don't like where they lead. So, separation or divorce, Walter? You have 72 hours to choose. And just so we're clear, in either scenario, Lorraine will need independent legal counsel and comprehensive medical care, for which you will be financially responsible. And you, I looked him straight in the eye, will need to grow up. 72 hours? Or what? He challenged, a last flicker of his old, arrogant defiance. I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of an auditor who has just found the lie in the ledger. The smile you smile when a lock you've been working on for months finally turns. Or I balance the books without you. He left. He didn't storm out. He just deflated. He gave Lorraine one last, pleading look, and when she refused to meet his eyes, he turned and walked out of the condo. The door closed with a soft, expensive click, the sound Marlene always loved to brag about. A quiet end to a loud marriage. Lorraine remained seated, her hands still wrapped around the glass of water as if it were an anchor. Her body seemed to have decided that stillness was the first safe thing it had done in months. The silence that filled the room now was different. It wasn't tense or angry. It was just empty. Ready to be filled with something new. Do you have someone? I asked, my voice gentle. A doctor you trust? A good lawyer? She shook her head, her eyes still fixed on the table. He said he'd handle everything, she whispered. Of course, he did, I said with a sigh. I tore a fresh sheet from my legal pad and wrote down 2 names and numbers. Dr. Chan, an excellent OBGYN my friend Brenda had used. Efficient, no drama. And Maren Cole, a name I'd gotten from an old colleague. She was a bulldog in family law. She won't let anyone call you a mistake, I said, sliding the page across the table to her. You don't owe me anything for this. And you don't owe me forgiveness either. Her eyes filled with tears, fast, and then cleared just as quickly, like a summer storm moving through. I believe the story he told me about you, she said, her voice thick. Cold. Controlling. She swallowed. You're not. Oh, I am, I said, surprising us both with a short, humorless laugh. But not in the way he meant. I'm the kind of cold that preserves evidence. I lifted the manila envelope, the weight of it now mine to carry. Thank you for this. After she left, I finally opened the envelope. I laid out the contents on the dining table like a surgeon arranging her instruments. Hotel receipts with dates that paired too neatly with his late meetings. Screenshots of cash withdrawals that matched the ATMs I had flagged. A wire transfer to Hartwell LLC, a Delaware entity with no face, clearly a shell to hide payments. The photographs, nothing explicit, but everything unmistakable. A weekend trip I didn't know about. A dinner where he was smiling at her in a way he hadn't smiled at me in years. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. The time for that was over. I simply began indexing. Exhibit B1, hotel invoices. Exhibit B2, unexplained cash withdrawals. Exhibit B3, wire transfers to Shell Corporation. I scanned each page, stamped it with the date, and locked the originals in the small safe under our bed. The next morning, I called Maren Cole. Her office was all glass and light wood, with a massive fiddle-leaf fig plant that looked like it had outlived several bitter divorces. Maren was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper haircut. She didn't offer condolences. She offered coffee. She skimmed through my binder, her expression a mixture of professional interest and something that looked like hunger. She loved a paper trail. You did my job for me, she murmured, flipping through the incident log. Dates, times, receipts, no editorializing. This is beautiful. A satisfied hum escaped her lips. I don't want to be liked, Ms. Cole, I said. I want to be finished. We'll get you there, she promised. The prenup limits alimony, but it doesn't preclude rehabilitative support, especially given your documented sacrifice of a high-earning career. The dissipation of assets helps immensely. Infidelity won't affect the property division in the state, but it will absolutely affect our leverage in the settlement negotiations. She tapped the binder. We file for temporary orders immediately. Exclusive use of the condo, a restraining order on all marital accounts, a demand for full financial disclosures, and a no harassment clause. We attach your meticulously prepared exhibits. And we ask for attorney's fees. Her smile was a small, sharp blade. The hearing for temporary orders happened 2 weeks later in a drab, airless courtroom that smelled like dust and consequence. Maren spoke like a metronome set just slightly faster than my heart. She laid out the facts, calmly, logically. Walter's lawyer, a slick man with an expensive watch, tried to paint my binders as the work of a hysterical, vindictive wife. He quickly realized his mistake. Hysteria is messy. My binders were boring, precise, and undeniable, like daylight. The judge, a weary-looking woman with kind eyes, skimmed the filings. She asked Walter's lawyer 2 pointed questions about the Hartwell LLC transfers, which he couldn't answer. She then granted exclusive use of the condo to me for the duration of the separation. She ordered full financial disclosures from Walter within 14 days and forbade both parties from dissipating, transferring, or hiding any marital assets. She looked directly at Walter over the rim of her reading glasses when she said the word dissipating, and for the first time, a proper, hot, undeniable shame colored his face. In the hallway after, Marlene was waiting like a weather front. Her pearls were tighter than usual, as if they'd volunteered to be a tourniquet. "This is a humiliation," she hissed, her voice low enough to count as intimacy. "You're making a public spectacle." "I'm building a life, Marlene," I said, my voice tired but firm. "Spectacles are for people who need to be seen. I prefer to be solvent." Walter put a hand on her arm. To my almost pity, he looked like the child in the room. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Stop." It didn't change her. But hearing him say it, it changed me, a little. The separation turned the condo into a clean ledger. My space. My home. The first thing I did was roll up the invisible line in the living room. The relief I felt was physical, like waking from a long, suffocating sleep you'd convinced yourself was a lifestyle. I started making changes. I hired a painter, a cheerful young man who filled the silent apartment with music, and had him paint the dreary beige walls a warm, hopeful white. I sold the massive, uncomfortable leather sofa that Walter had picked out, the one that had been the site of so many Cold Wars, and bought two comfortable, overstuffed armchairs that invited conversation, even if it was only with myself. I bought new plates, brightly colored and mismatched, that matched nothing we'd owned before, on purpose. I could afford it. I had started at Kestrel and Bloom the week after the hearing. The forensic unit felt like coming home. I was given a desk, a computer, and a stack of files filled with chaos. My job was to make it show its math. And I was good at it. The first paycheck that was deposited into my own, separate bank account felt like a miracle. It wasn't just money, it was proof. Proof of my competence, my value, my independence. I walked home from the office that Friday in shoes that didn't pinch, and I stopped in a little stationery shop and bought myself new notebooks, grid-lined, spiral-bound pages that invited a straight story. One Wednesday, as I was deep in a bakery's books, tracing a siphon that had been cleverly disguised as loyalty to a single, overpriced supplier, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Lorraine. He finally told his mother about the baby. I found my own lawyer. Thank you. The three little dots appeared and disappeared as she typed. Then, I heard about the hearing. Good. A beat later, a final message came through. I'm going to be okay. So are you. I believed her. I believed her the way you believe someone who has finally stopped apologizing to gravity and has decided to stand on their own 2 feet. Mediation was set for a Friday in a sterile office building that could have been a bank if it had more money and fewer boxes of tissues. A neutral mediator walked us through the inventory of a shared life. Marin made the dollar amounts feel like the weather, impersonal, expected, manageable. Walter cycled through his emotions, pride, anger, resignation. Then, finally, he landed on a fourth thing I didn't recognize on him, listening. Our offer, drafted by Marin and me, was clean and final. I keep the condo. We offset its value with a one-time cash payment to him from the other marital assets. He repays $120,000 to the marital estate as a dissipation credit for the money funneled to Lorraine and his cash stash. In exchange, a mutual, ironclad confidentiality clause. No alimony beyond a one-time rehabilitative stipend that exactly equaled the cost of my CPA exams and licensing, already paid for by me, but included in the settlement to make the ledger honest. Each party retains their own retirement accounts as titled, per the prenup. No future claims. Clean. He read the number for the dissipation credit twice. You're taking my home, he said quietly, not with anger, but with a hollow sort of sadness. No, Walter, I said, my voice just as quiet. I'm choosing mine. He looked at my face for a long time, searching for a crack, an angle, a flicker of the old Judith. There wasn't one. He picked up the pen and signed. When it was all done, Marin shook my hand like a colleague, not a savior. You did good work, Judith, she said. You'll sleep well now. I'll work well now, I corrected, and that felt even better. The condo sale was recorded on a date that felt like a clean, final line in a ledger. I paid him his offset with a cashier's check that felt like a long, slow exhale. I changed the locks, not out of fear, but because even a balanced book needs a cover. I installed new, brighter bulbs in every single light fixture, because I could. That weekend, I invited Brenda and two of her loudest friends over for dinner and fed them things that would have terrified Walter: rich butter, spicy food, loud laughter, and unrestrained vulnerability. A month later, on a Tuesday that smelled like rain again, I sat in a quiet, monitored test center and wrote my way through the CPA exam. The questions felt like poems in a language I never should have abandoned. Weeks after that, the email arrived while I was in the grocery store, staring at the cereal aisle like a woman who actually had a future to plan for. The subject line was simple: CPA examination results. My hands trembled as I opened it. Congratulations. The word shimmered on the small screen. A word that used to belong to other people, to Walter, now belonged to me. I bought the most ridiculous, sugary cereal in the store to celebrate, the kind with colorful marshmallows that taste like nostalgia. I carried it home like a trophy. That night, I opened the marriage liquidation spreadsheet one last time, the file that had held my spine together when I felt like collapsing. I selected the title and retitled it, Judith's Balance Sheet. I set up new tabs: assets, liabilities, equity. It sounds like a joke until you start typing in the cells. Under assets intangible, I wrote, integrity. Competence. Time reclaimed. Silence. Boundaries. Under liabilities retired, I typed, apologies for existing. Performing hunger. Pour over coffee at 6:15 a.m. for someone who forgot my name when he said we. And under equity, I put a single, powerful entry: myself. The last time I saw Walter was 2 months after the divorce decree was finalized. I was returning from a run, sweaty and alive, and he was in the lobby of my building, presumably visiting a friend. He stepped aside to let me pass with a courtesy he'd learned far too late. "Judith," he said. "How are you?" And he surprised me by sounding like he genuinely meant the question. "Paid in full," I said with a small smile. He looked past me to the elevator doors, as if the answers to his life might arrive there. "I'm trying," he said, and I knew he meant that, too. He had shadows under his eyes and was wearing a tie he'd chosen himself. The color was almost right. "Keep the receipts," I said gently. "For yourself." He laughed once, a real, unpretty, broken sound, and nodded. "You were always better with the math." "You were always better with the show," I said, not unkindly. "Maybe it's time to pick something different to be good at." The elevator arrived. I stepped in, pressed the button for my floor, and didn't look back. Upstairs, my condo smelled like lemons and fresh paper and whatever hope is before it learns its own name. My desk held a stack of files, 2 small businesses that needed their ghosts exorcised and a pro bono case Marin had sent over, a woman like the woman I had been, learning to put her life back in rows. I sat down, opened a new notebook, and wrote the date. Then I wrote the first line of the next chapter, which wasn't a chapter at all, but a life. Open balance carried forward, 0.00. And under it, because some ledgers belong in both columns, I wrote, revenue recognition begins. Thank you so much for listening to my story, for sticking with me through all of it. It means the world to me. If any part of this resonated with you, if you've ever felt unseen or have had to fight to reclaim your own story, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories give me strength, just as I hope mine has given some to you. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories. Until next time, be kind to yourselves, and always, always keep your own ledger.